The first thing they feel is the deck twist under their boots, a sudden lean that throws coffee across a chart table and sends a mess tray skidding to the scuppers. Then the sound hits, a deep metallic rip that seems to come from everywhere at once, like the ship herself is crying out. A black wall fills the starboard horizon. Men on the bridge of the USS Hobson don't have time to process the shape before the carrier's bow is on them, steel biting into steel, the shock driving through frames and bulkheads. Lights flicker, steam screams. The destroyer minesweeper shudders, breaks at the waist, and water rushes in as if the ocean has been waiting for its chance all night. A few hours earlier, on April 26, 1952, the night had been the kind that lets sailors settle into pattern. The North Atlantic lay west of the Azores, cold and dark, heaving in long, regular swells. The aircraft carrier USS Wasp was running flight operations, turning into the wind to recover planes. Off her quarters, 2 escorts rode plane guard, USS Rodman on one side, Hobson, veteran of the Atlantic and the Pacific, on the other. The drill was familiar. When the carrier turned, escorts slowed, opened the lane, and slid back into station astern. You never crossed the carrier's bow. You never invited geometry to do what it always does when tons of momentum meet wishful thinking. Hobson had history in her plating. Commissioned in wartime as a Gleaves-class destroyer, reworked as a high-speed minesweeper by 1944, she had escorted convoys, dodged U-boats, watched the Normandy coast burn, and fought through the suicide skies off Okinawa. Now she wore the designation DMS-26. She was quick, responsive, and used to the choreography that keeps carriers and their screens from chewing each other up. Her new commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander William Tierney, had only recently taken command, but the crew knew their stations and the rhythms of carrier work. Near 10:20 p.m., with Wasp preparing to recover aircraft, Tierney laid out his intent. He wanted Hobson to shift to the carrier's port quarter when the turn was done. There are safe ways to achieve that. Slow early, widen out, and pass behind the carrier after she swings. The plan discussed aboard Hobson called for a tighter cut that would bring the destroyer across Wasp's path. The executive officer, Lieutenant William Hofer, recognized the hazard and argued the point. Minutes bled away, the carrier's turn drawing closer, the dark sea offering no extra room. On the bridge, orders began to stack. Left full rudder. On Wasp, red lights glowed over silent catwalks, and the landing signal officers eyed the deck. Watches tracked the plane guard destroyers. Someone on the carrier's bridge saw Hobson's wake veer sharply and felt the bad math in his gut. The carrier went to emergency reverse. It wasn't enough. A ship that size carries momentum like a freight train. Hobson, cutting across the bow in a left turn, couldn't clear. The collision at 22:24 was catastrophic. Wasp's bow punched into Hobson around the midships area. Frames buckled. The destroyer's forward and aft sections sheared apart, the break undoing the ship in seconds. Men asleep below had no warning. Compartments flooded in a breath. On the main deck, sailors were thrown flat, then pitched toward the sea as the halves rolled and went down. A few clung to rails or grabbed for lines. Others found themselves in black water, turned slick and suffocating with fuel oil. Wasp swung into rescue as if the air group's lives depended on it, because now Hobson's did. Floodlights knifed out across the slick. Lines, cargo nets, and rafts went over the side. Sailors lined the galleries, hauling men from the water hand over hand. Rodman charged in to help, throwing her own nets and liferings, her deck crew cutting fouled gear off men who came aboard coated in oil and barely able to breathe. In the confusion, a raft dropped from Wasp, landed on survivors, and never surfaced again. Another man, perched on sinking steel, timed one desperate jump and swung onto the carrier's bow, piping like a gymnast, the kind of move you only get once in a life. In less than 5 minutes, Hobson was gone. The silence that follows such a loss is its own noise. Over the next hour, Wasp and Rodman pulled aboard 61 men, shaking, burned, or battered from debris. 176 never made it back. It was the Navy's deadliest peacetime shipboard disaster since the war, and it didn't happen in a storm or a fight. It happened on a working night when procedure should have been enough. Dawn revealed a carrier with a torn, jagged bow and an empty patch of ocean where a destroyer should have been. Oil still braided the swells. The search turned up debris, life jackets, and the kinds of things sailors can identify at a glance: familiar grips, a section of ladder, a fragment of nameplate that doesn't belong by itself. Then the ocean closed over, as oceans do, and the rest shifted ashore. Telegrams, duty officers knocking on doors, and a court of inquiry convened to turn chaos into a narrative with cause and effect. Survivors from Hobson and watchstanders from Wasp told their stories in spare language. The basic facts aligned. Wasp had to swing right to recover planes. Hobson, off the carrier's starboard quarter, had 2 clear, practiced options to stay clear: ease back and pass astern after the turn, or widen out and come around well outside the carrier's arc. Instead, Hobson turned left into the path of the bow. Why that choice was made in that moment, fatigue, misread angles, the pressure to keep station, died with the men on the bridge. The Navy's finding was blunt anyway. A grave error in judgment by Hobson's commanding officer caused the collision. Wasp, the court concluded, was not at fault. That wasn't the end of it. The inquiry reached into procedure and communication, trying to pull out lessons that would matter the next time a carrier's deck crew called for a turn in the dark. Recommendations followed: clearer signals to escorts during flight operations, more explicit schedules for launches and recoveries so plane guards could anticipate moves, and reinforcement, at every level, of the simple truth that room is life. In the years that followed, those lessons settled into doctrine and night orders. The words changed future decisions because the names on the casualty list demanded that they change. Back in Charleston, where Hobson had been launched in 1941, the memory was set in stone. A memorial went up, its granite faces etched with the names of the men lost. Sailors on liberty would stop, read a few, and then more, the list longer than it first looks. They'd go quiet, because you do when you see your own job titles carved in rock. You can picture the ship's layout from habit: the forward fire room, the mess, the berthing compartments, and you can imagine the clock on a bulkhead still reading 22:24, phosphorescent hands frozen in a moment no one aboard controlled after that last turn order went out. For the rescued, the night never fully ended. The smell of oil sticks, the feel of a cold line in your hands, the instant weight of another man's life hanging from it. Those things lodge under the skin. Some remembered the absurd details: a flashlight still clipped to a pocket after the roll, a boot that wouldn't come off, the way the carrier's floodlights made the spray sparkle, like it didn't belong to the same ocean that had just taken their ship. They knew who had been sleeping and who had been on watch. They knew which hatches jammed and which opened. They knew how fast everything happens when steel meets steel at speed. Ask why the story endures, and the answer is simple. This is the kind of loss that blooms out of routine. Everyone on those bridges had done versions of this dance 100 times. The sea didn't change. The procedures didn't change. One choice did. It is the memory every escort captain carries when a black carrier begins her turn into the wind at night. It's the reminder to slow earlier than you think, to make more room than you believe you need, to keep geometry from deciding for you. It's a warning written in the names of men who had earned the right to a quiet crossing and never got it. If you stand on a carrier's bow today during night ops, You can feel the old caution in the way people move. Orders come a shade sooner. Plane guards ease back a touch farther. Habit has a new floor. Somewhere out there under cold water lies a broken hull and the section where a handful of men clung to life for a few minutes more. They are why the bow watch looks twice and why a destroyer's officer of the deck hears an XO's concern and decides to take the wide, boring, safe line around. No one carves granite for a near miss. The goal is to earn a future where near misses are all you get. The sea kept its wreck and moved on. Families kept the dates and the names. The fleet kept the lessons. And night after night, in rough water and fair, carriers turn into the wind while their escorts make space, slide astern, and hold station with just a little more patience than before, because a broken minute on a spring night in 1952 taught them what 5 seconds of bad geometry can cost. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.